Yeah. It is our Friday show. On Fridays, we like to look at the week and look at what's going on in politics, in news of all sorts. We do it with a guy who is quite extraordinary in what he's covered. He's an award-winning journalist. You've heard before all of his awards, from the Peabodys to the Edward R. Murrow Awards. He was the senior correspondent at ABC News and longtime White House correspondent as well at ABC. How about it for Jim Avila, everybody?
Good morning, Mark. How are you?
Good morning, sir. I'm well. It is great to have you in the mix. I was watching.
Good to be here.
I was watching with some interest the theater of BS that is these congressional hearings on the Justice Department and the weaponization of them. I mean, it's utter theater, utter crap. I mean, and an utter waste of taxpayer
Shouldn't
money.
They be on
I might
strike?
add. Yeah, right.
I mean,
Thank you. They are actors.
This whole acting thing is. And let me just say before we get started that Fran Drescher has done Drescher has done a great job. It was a great speech yesterday. I've been a member of AFTRA since for 45 years. Not always the strongest of unions. But has always had a great pension plan and a health plan. But what they're standing up for right now is very important to the actors, especially. And she seems to be doing pretty well. And I watched. It's a little bit political, so I'll get into it just a moment. I watched Bob Iger, my former boss at Disney, claim that they were out of touch. This is the guy who made $170 million as a CEO, and he's telling me that actors are out of touch, writers are out of touch. That's ridiculous. And these CEOs who run these places, like Warner and all these other, and Disney and Universal, are making huge amounts of money. And their streaming stuff is profitable, even though they won't allow us to see what the profits are. And they're really trying to take advantage and set the industry back as far as creativity is concerned. So there's my stance on that.
I love that you mentioned it because it's actually a huge story, and it's a huge story for labor, and it's a huge story for labor with a lot of the threads that run through a lot of other labor negotiations. We were talking about AI and we're talking about robotics in relation to the supply chain. We had an international supply chain expert on a couple of weeks ago about that. So there are other unions, I guess, that I'm dealing with in other conversations that are facing many of the same things. And you make a good point, and I'll just even make a finer point on your point, which is that Iger and others have spoken about the essential aspect of freezing out the union at this moment in time. In other words, we all know this is an inflection moment. We talked about how the industry has changed. We did a 20 minutes at the beginning of the show, and you can go back and actually hear it if you want. But I think most of us are aware that.
Hear it.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. And but the point is simply that at this key moment, it's very possible, and they've spoken about this. I mean, there are all of these different leaked, both memos and conversations that relate to, we can wait them out. The writers and actors don't have the money for a long strike, and we can wait them out. And the idea somehow that these studios are hurting, as you say, is ridiculous. Look, Apple, what is it? It's a $2.5 trillion company. I mean,
right.
That's rich, man.
And Bezos owns Prime Video.
Yeah, I mean, please. I mean, I don't see why it's an unreasonable request at all to allow profit sharing within this model. So there's something else going on, Jim. They passed this defense bill, and in this defense bill is a glimpse of, I guess, the only thing that's talked about now, which is sort of the wokeness of the left and how we have to dry clean the wokeness of the left from every bill. So this House partisan defense bill that would limit abortion access and transgender care and diversity training for military personnel, that passes, then that goes to the Senate, right? And that's where it will. I mean, and there's a. It's not just woke stuff. That's just the stuff I'm talking about that they flagged. I mean, it's a raise for troops. It's all this money for weapon systems, etc. Give me the state of the state on that. What will happen? Is this just a political grandstanding moment, or will it actually have teeth?
Well, I think it's going to be, it's another situation where, fortunately, let me just say fortunately first off, most people don't watch what goes on in Congress on a day-to-day basis. Now, that's fortunate and unfortunate, of course. Um, so what's going on now is really inside baseball a lot. Um, the the problem, of course, is what the right wants to do, and what they're attempting to do is, if you're in the Army, Marines, Air Force, Navy, whatever, and you're in a state where they don't allow abortion, which of course is in most of them, because most of our bases are really in the South. Many of them are in the South. Um, so they're not going to. What we're doing now, our policy currently, is that we allow uh, women in the military to move to a state where it's legal. Go get the procedure or whatever it is, their health care is needed, whatever health care is needed, and then come back and serve the rest of their term. The right doesn't want that to happen. And what they're saying is that the Hyde Amendment, which prohibits the abortion to be paid for government funds, that's what you're doing during the current policy. And so they have, in fact, put in the appropriations bill, which pays for all the military, and I have problems with that on another level. But at any rate, what they're doing is they're putting in this provision which doesn't allow them to travel. So they will. What are they going to do? They're going to have to travel on their own, and people in the military don't make much money. It's not a lucrative business. They're in there most of the time for their education and to serve their country. A lot of people go in there to get educated, and it's really not fair. So your question was, what will happen? I don't think the Senate is going to go along with this, and so there's going to be a big stare down again on who's going to blink on this. And unfortunately, McCarthy has no power whatsoever, and his right-wing folks are really still upset about the fact that they didn't shut down the government the last time, and they're going to attempt to shut down the military. And which is really, isn't it amazing? These are the guys who, wear the flags on their shoulders and claim, they're so pro-military, and yet they're hurting the people in the military. Right now, there are no raises going on. There's no promotions going on. They're really hurting the people in the military. Has it really affected our readiness? Not at this point, I don't think. Although the Democrats are trying to make that case. I think we're over ready anyway, in my opinion.
I see a couple of comments, and we'll kind of swing around if there's time at the end, and I'll ask Jim to respond to them. This is far away from that which we've just spoken of, but yet it's around us, and that is the record heat that's enveloping the globe. I mean, This is extraordinary. The temperatures in the West over the next few days, we've seen 4 of the hottest days in recorded history. And the heat in the West could reach 130 degrees in Death Valley. And again, I understand that's, one of the hottest places on earth, but it's also something of a bellwether as that temperature gets to those extremes. Temperatures surrounding also rise. So I'm getting to a point about labor, okay? The idea somehow that we have to work outdoors in this heat, that we ask people to work outdoors through the summer. There are no protections in place for this new normal, as it's called, or new abnormal, as it's called, whatever. It feels as though we get distracted with this stuff as voters. The wokeness and all that crap that we were just talking about in relation to congressional conversations. But they're real lives of real people affected, and now real workers affected by being asked to work in that insane heat, which we're likely to see continue on into, well, I mean, as long as we're here. It's the planet's only getting hotter.
Yeah, and I think the point you're trying to make here is that we're not focused on the right things in Congress. And if you have been watching in any way the kind of circus that's been going on recently, they had FBI Director Wray in yesterday, who made who he's a conservative guy appointed by Trump, and he just lit them on fire. These from Jim Jordan on down, Matt Matt
Gates.
Gates, he just ripped them apart. He said, I'm a conservative. What are you talking about? It's absurd that I would do these things, that I would go after conservatives like you say I am, or like the FBI is. But this, and then of course the other thing that they're doing with this phony whistleblower, who's actually a spy for the Chinese and actually an arms dealer, and they're claiming now, of course, that he was arrested because he was because he was going to talk about the Biden quote unquote crime family. Well, the truth is that he was arrested back in October, before any of this happened, and while the Republicans had not even raised any of this, and he had nothing. He didn't start complaining until after they arrested him, and then he suddenly had all these things about Biden. So, and he works for the Chinese government. So, they're wasting all their time, they're wasting all this money, and there are real serious things that could be done. And you're right, there is no law. There's a big article in the New York Times today about how there's no law protecting workers from employers who make them work out in the heat. It's not illegal. So, could something be done there? There's lots of real policy issues out there that need to be addressed, including, there should have been, and we wasted a lot of time, there should have been some kind of abortion law passed in the House and the Senate that would have prevented all of this. So, it is a bunch of theater. They are actors. I even don't even want to mention their names of the people who were doing this because that's all they want. They want to be in the conversation. And MTG has not passed a bill since she's been in Congress. Nothing. Bobart, nothing. Jim Jordan, nothing. They've not proposed any kind of legislation whatsoever. It's really a shame what they've done to Congress.
Well, and I like that you bring it all together, because this is a body that could be protecting Americans, protecting workers from the heat, as I say, or at least providing certain safeguards for many of these workers that we need, and infrastructure that has suffered enormously. Biden got that huge infrastructure plan through, and infrastructure suffers under these extreme temperature variations and in this, again, new normal that is this planet. These are things that legislators, that lawmakers have to deal with. Instead, it's a bunch of flag waving and virtue signaling.
Yeah, and you talk about what these people are doing out there. It's time after time after time. They just have one absurd idea after another, and it's one fight after another. The only thing there was a good thing that happened this week and is in the news today, which is kind of surprising to me, which is that fundraising by Joe Biden outpaced both DeSantis and Trump. That despite the fact that there are some misgivings, including in this room, about whether or not Joe Biden is the best candidate because of his age, apparently the donor class is right behind him, and they have given him all kinds of money to work with, and so that is a good sign for the Democrats. That always, money means enthusiasm in many cases, And in this case, it does appear as though there's enthusiasm for Joe Biden. He had another good week, overseas, where he held the coalition together. He's making Putin look like a fool. Putin got into this war to try to, one of the reasons was to try to divide and make NATO weaker. Instead, he's done the opposite. NATO has added two new, very strong, right on his border nations in Sweden and Finland. He kept everybody together despite the controversial cluster bomb issue and despite the controversial whether Ukraine should become a member of NATO. But they all stayed together and they're a solid front. And Russia's going to have problems if they attempt to continue to expand into the other countries around them. And that's the purpose of NATO. And he continues to make it strong.
And NATO does appear strong, and I guess the expansion of NATO now. I mean, there's a lot of NATO. Even I would have put Ukraine in this category. That's sort of de facto. You have de facto membership, although clearly the contractual relationship that NATO has with the signatory countries is an important one, because obviously it's an attack on one NATO country is an attack on all of them, and it would really involve NATO troops, American troops over there. You don't have that, obviously, with Ukraine. The munitions, the cluster munitions you talk about, the cluster bombs, they did go over, so that is
they're there.
Yeah, part of the arsenal there in Ukraine. I was going to read you a comment or two and have you respond.
Sure.
The low wage. Sorry. People are suggesting different things to beat the heat in that kind of thing. This is everything wrong with government. They see the changes and the necessity to adapt to the change, and they act like things haven't changed. I feel like that is humanity on some level. We're just it's a slow disaster movie that we're living. That's from the Lady Beatrice.
A lot of people are convinced, I'm not, and I know you're not, that somehow we'll technology our way out of the climate crisis. I don't think that's going to happen. I think, fortunately or unfortunately, we're too old to worry about it that much. It's probably not going to end the world by the time we're gone. But our next generation is really in big trouble, and we're seeing it already. I don't know that we're going to AI ourselves out of climate change. It's serious business, and it is the existential threat to our world, as Joe Biden and as Obama said for years, and the Republicans scoff at.
Most certainly. Climate change in this Congress is not even on the agenda, Vilma says. All they want to do is investigate Hunter Biden while we welt in heat. And the other things that come from that climate change and climate crisis are associated with food inequality. When it comes to access to food, there is more and more of a gulf between those who have access and those who don't. The refugee crisis, C point A, many refugees fleeing to where they can eat. It is the world is on its side on some level, or heading that way. And we're lucky, it's always, it's just an absolute accident of birth that we have access to what we have access to in this country.
In some ways, I wish I was born in Sweden or Finland or someplace like that, where they have happy people and people who are fed and taken care of, and there's a big social net. I mean, here, the biggest problem this world, and I say this I think every week, that this world has and this country has, is income inequality. We're not going to solve homelessness. We're not going to solve any of this stuff as long as we continue to have this huge gap between what the really rich make and how much they pay in taxes and how much the poor make. I have a Trader Joe's downstairs in my building, and I went down there yesterday to pick up something.
Please don't brag on the show about your access to the media elite things you have access to.
So I walk in there, And I'm walking out, and I see a guy with a cane walking out right in front of me. And he looks a little bedraggled, and I figure he's probably a homeless guy. And I see a Trader Joe's person walking behind him. And sure enough, he had walked out without paying for some food. And I'm like, whoa, he just stole something. And then I'm thinking, yeah, he just stole something, but he's hungry. And the Trader Joe's person went outside and said, are you going to pay for that? And he just kept walking. And they didn't do anything because they can't do anything anymore. It is happening so often because they've had to resort to this, that stores cannot even enforce shoplifting rules anymore. It's just, it's too dangerous, and there's too many. They'd spend all their money on enforcement. So a guy gets a handful of whatever he took and walks away. And it's happening everywhere. I mean, Starbucks, they won't stop people. I see people going to Starbucks. They go to where they put the coffee cups, waiting for people to pick them up, and they just go and pick it up and pretend that it's theirs and walk out.
Wow.
And what do? There's not much they can do. It's just we are in such a position, of such a place, that it's really sad.
Of course, you're absolutely right. And, in major cities, we're seeing it like crazy. I mean, bands of thieves go in. I mean, you're just describing situations where it's almost, it's like a Charles Dickens modern story.
Yeah.
This guy needs it, or Les Miserables, the guy needs steals half a loaf of bread. But
these organized guys who break
these
in,
organized guys
that's
are
a whole
different.
different thing. Yeah,
I went into Walgreens, not bragging, but I was at Walgreens yesterday, and they
what
had
is
that.
It that Clarence Thomas says? He says, "Hey, I got
the Walmart,
Walmart, yeah,
Walmart parking lot." Where is Clarence Thomas? Do we have him? Yeah,
I come from regular stock.
Yeah,
I prefer the Walmart parking lots.
Yeah, I didn't see Clarence Thomas. I did see everything locked up though. I literally just needed to get deodorant, and I had to ask the woman to come unlock the deodorant area.
And when she got close, she hustled.
All right, you can find him here on Fridays, looking back at things, and you can find his column. If you find it every Tuesday, does it drop?
Yeah, Tuesdays.
Tuesdays, the Jim Avila column on media and politics, and we'll look forward to visiting with you next week. He's the great Jim Avila, everybody. Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, right on. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.